It began, once again, in the early morning hours, when the shift operators at TMI were alarmed by a buildup of steam pressure on a valve. Without approval from anyone, they simply opened the valve and allowed the steam, along with a substantial amount of radioactive material, to escape into the atmosphere. It so happened that at that precise moment, a helicopter was taking radiation readings directly above the plant's exhaust stack. Not surprisingly, those readings indicated a very high radiation exposure rate, 1,200 millirems per hour, a rate certainly high enough to warrant an evacuation if the readings had been taken in nearby Middletown, in Harrisburg, or anywhere off the plant site itself. But coming directly out of the stack, where the materials immediately were dispersed, such a reading was no more significant than those taken on the previous 2 days of the crisis. Unfortunately, in a classic manifestation of what I was later to call the garble gap between Harrisburg and Washington, the NRC's Washington-based executive management team thought that the readings had indeed been taken in an off-site area and decided to recommend that we evacuate all residents within a 5-mile radius of the plant. Also, unfortunately, the Washington group forwarded its recommendations up to us through our emergency management director instead of our radiation protection director, the latter of whom could have corrected the error and spared Pennsylvania from reaching the very brink of panic which was to ensue. And even more unfortunately, the emergency management director called a local civil defense director who called a local radio station with news that an evacuation order for me might well be imminent. I had yet to be informed about any of this. When the word finally did get to me that a Doc Collins from Washington was saying we should evacuate, I was dumbfounded. I had no idea who Doc Collins was, or by what authority or for what reason he was making such a recommendation. And I certainly did not intend to evacuate 250,000 people on such incomplete information. For no matter how well planned, massive evacuations have the potential to kill or injure people, especially the aged and infirm, infants in incubators, other hospital patients, and even the able-bodied bystander who, like the usher in a burning theater, happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I started to ask questions. My difficulty in getting answers was compounded by the jamming of our switchboard, thanks not only to the premature disclosure of an erroneous evacuation advisory, but by the mysterious tripping as well of an emergency siren that soon had hearts pounding and eyes widening all over the city. People were throwing their belongings into trucks and cars, locking up their shops and homes, and packing to get out of town. If ever we were close to general panic, this was the moment. I placed a call to the NRC chairman himself, and by the time I reached him, his staff had discovered what my own radiation experts were telling me, that the evacuation advisory was a mistake. The NRC group withdrew the advisory, and I immediately went on the radio to assure our people that the alarm was a false one and that there was to be no general evacuation.